The rehearsal dinner was supposed to start at 6 o'clock. I arrived at 5:45 dressed in a simple navy dress I'd bought 3 years ago. My sister Margot had made it very clear on the family group chat that this was a sophisticated affair and that I shouldn't embarrass the family with those bargain clothes. I walked into Rosewood Estates' grand ballroom and felt that familiar knot in my stomach. The venue was spectacular, 20-foot ceilings with crystal chandeliers, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the gardens, and enough space for the 300 guests Margot had invited to her wedding rehearsal. Yes, 300 people for a rehearsal. Victoria. My mother's voice cut through the classical music playing softly in the background. She approached me with that expression I knew so well, the one that said she was about to criticize me while pretending to be helpful. Mom. I smiled. The venue looks beautiful. Yes. Well, your sister has excellent taste. She stopped herself, glancing around to make sure no one was listening. We need to talk about where you're sitting. My father appeared beside her, adjusting his Rolex. Dad had always been about appearances. His custom Tom Ford suit probably cost more than I supposedly made in a month. The seating chart, Dad said flatly. We've placed you in the back. The back? I asked, though I already knew this was coming. Mom touched my arm with those perfectly manicured nails. Sweetheart, you're not really family anymore. Not in the way that matters. We're embarrassed you even came. Honestly, the words should have hurt. 3 years ago, they would have destroyed me. But I'd learned something important in those 3 years. Silence is power. I understand, I said quietly. Dad looked relieved. He hated confrontation, especially public ones. Good. We knew you'd be reasonable. Now, Margot specifically requested that you don't speak to any of the Wellington family. Richard's parents are very influential and we can't risk. Risk what? I asked. You know what, Mom said, lowering her voice. His situation? It reflects poorly on all of us. My situation. That's what they called it. 3 years ago, I'd walked away from the family business, Hayes Financial Consulting, the firm my grandfather built that my father now ran into mediocrity. I told them I wanted to do something different, something meaningful. They'd laughed. Then they'd gotten angry. Then they'd cut me off completely. I'll sit in the back, I said. No problem. My brother Marcus appeared, champagne in hand, fiancée Priya on his arm. Marcus had always been the golden child, joining Dad at the firm right after college. He'd never questioned, never challenged, never dreamed of anything beyond the family playbook. Baby sister, he grinned, but it didn't reach his eyes. Surprised you showed up. Thought you'd be too busy with your little projects. Priya giggled. She'd never liked me. Marcus, be nice. Victoria is trying her best. I am being nice, Marcus said. I didn't mention how she's living in that tiny apartment in Queens, or how she's been wearing the same 3 dresses for years, or how she... Marcus. My father's voice carried warning. Not here. But the damage was done. Several family members had turned to look, including my Aunt Catherine, who'd never missed an opportunity to gossip, and my cousin James, who worked at a hedge fund and never let anyone forget it. I felt the familiar heat in my cheeks, but kept my smile in place. Excuse me. I should find my seat. I walked toward the back of the ballroom, past the perfectly set tables with their ivory linens and gold chargers, past the towering floral arrangements that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent, past the ice sculpture of 2 swans that Margot had insisted on. The back row, table 47, as far from the head table as possible while still technically being in the room. I sat down and checked my phone. 3 missed calls from my executive assistant, David. 2 texts from my head of acquisitions, Jennifer. 1 email from my attorney, Mark Durgent. I ignored them all. Tonight wasn't about business. Tonight was about family, even if that family had decided I was no longer worthy of the name. Margot made her entrance 15 minutes later. She looked stunning, of course. My sister had always been beautiful, tall, blonde, effortlessly elegant. Her rehearsal dinner dress probably cost $15,000. Her engagement ring, a massive cushion-cut diamond from Richard Wellington III, could fund a small school. She swept through the room accepting congratulations, air-kissing guests, posing for photos. She didn't look at me, Not once. Richard's family arrived shortly after. The Wellingtons were old money, the kind of old money that made my family's wealth look new and shiny and slightly desperate. Richard's father owned half of Manhattan's commercial real estate. His mother sat on the boards of 3 major museums. The rehearsal itself was brief. The wedding planner, a severe woman named Diane, directed everyone through their positions. I watched from my back row seat as Margot practiced walking down the aisle, as the bridesmaids giggled and posed, as Richard's groomsmen made jokes about bachelor parties. Then Diane clapped her hands. All right, everyone. Before we begin the dinner service, our venue director needs to make a brief announcement about tomorrow's timeline. The venue director stepped to the microphone. Thomas Chin. I'd hired him myself 2 years ago when I acquired the Rosewood Collection. He was brilliant, Harvard MBA, trained at the finest hotels in Europe, fluent in 5 languages. Thomas looked directly at me. I gave him the smallest nod. Good evening, everyone, Thomas said, his voice carrying easily through the sound system. Welcome to Rosewood Estates. Before we begin, I need Ms. Victoria Hayes' approval on the final setup for tomorrow's ceremony. The room went silent. 300 guests turned to look. I could feel every pair of eyes finding me in the back row. My mother's face drained of color. Thomas continued, as owner of Rosewood Estates and this entire wedding venue collection, Miss Hayes needs to sign off on the additional services requested this afternoon. I stood slowly, smoothing my simple navy dress. I walked down the center aisle as the silence stretched and thickened. My heels clicked on the marble floor. No one spoke. No one moved. When I reached Thomas, he handed me an iPad. The Wellington family requested an additional ice sculpture, upgraded champagne service, and the premium floral package. The total comes to $47,000. Shall I approve it? I glanced at the screen, then at my sister. Margot looked like she might faint. Richard Wellington's parents were staring at me with undisguised shock. Approved, I said clearly. And Thomas, please upgrade the champagne again to the Dom Perignon 2008 on the house. Very generous, Miss Hayes. Thank you. I turned to face the room. My family sat frozen at the head table. Dad's mouth was actually hanging open. Marcus had gone pale. Mom looked like she'd seen a ghost. I apologize for the interruption, I said. Please continue with the rehearsal dinner. I started walking back to my seat, but my father stood abruptly. Victoria, what? How? How do I own this place? I finished for him. I stopped walking, turning to face him. I own 11 luxury wedding and event venues across the tri-state area. Rosewood Estates is the flagship property. I acquired it 2 years ago. Aunt Catherine gasped. Cousin James dropped his champagne glass. That's impossible, Marcus said, standing as well. You left with nothing. You were living in Queens. I was appearing to live modestly, I corrected. There's a difference. Richard Wellington Sr. stood, and when he spoke, his voice carried authority. Miss Hayes, I apologize. We had no idea. Your family said you were struggling. My family says a lot of things, I replied. Thomas reappeared at my elbow. Miss Hayes, your CFO is on the line. The Singapore acquisition closed. Shall I tell her you'll call back? Singapore, Dad whispered. I smiled at Thomas. Tell Jennifer I'll call her after dinner. And Thomas, can you bring the portfolio summary I requested? Of course. He disappeared and returned moments later with a leather folder. I took it, walked to the head table, and set it in front of my father. Since we're all family here, I said, I thought you might want to see what I've been doing for the past 3 years. Dad opened the folder with shaking hands. The first page showed the Rosewood Collection's holding structure, 11 properties, total valuation $847 million. He flipped to the second page, my hospitality investment portfolio, boutique hotels, luxury resorts, event spaces. Total portfolio value, $2.1 billion. The third page showed my venture capital investments, tech startups, sustainable energy companies, medical research firms. Current valuation, $1.8 billion. $4.7 billion, I said quietly. Give or take a few million depending on the market. Mom made a small sound like air escaping from a balloon. Margot finally found her voice. You're lying. This is fake. I can call my attorney if you'd like verification, I offered. Or we can call Forbes. I'm on next month's cover for their feature on self-made billionaires under 30. Richard Wellington Jr., Richard to his friends, spoke for the first time. The Victoria Hayes. The one who revolutionized the boutique hospitality industry. That's me. He looked at Margot, then at me, then back at Margot. Something shifted in his expression. Margot, he said slowly. You told me your sister worked in, what was it? Hotel management. I do work in hotel management, I said. I manage the hotels I own. Thomas appeared again. Miss Hayes, I'm sorry to interrupt, but there's a situation with tomorrow's catering. The Wellington family requested Petrosian caviar service. But your standing order is for Calvisius. Shall I? Calvisius is better, Richard Sr. interrupted. If Miss Hayes prefers it, we defer to her expertise. Dad, Margot protested. But Richard Sr. wasn't looking at his son's fiancée. He was looking at me with the expression of a man recalculating an entire situation. Miss Hayes, he said, I wonder if we might speak privately after dinner. My commercial real estate division has been looking for a hospitality partner for our new development in Hudson Yards. I'd be happy to, I replied. Though I should mention, I'm already in talks with the Vanderbilt Group about that property. His eyebrows rose. You work fast. I have to. Good opportunities don't wait. I excused myself and walked back to my table, but I didn't sit down. Instead, I picked up my clutch and turned to leave. Victoria. Mom's voice was desperate now. Wait. We need to talk. We didn't know. If we'd known. If you'd known I was successful, you would have treated me like family, I finished. That says everything, doesn't it? That's not fair, Dad said, finding his voice. You left us. You abandoned the family business. I built my own business, I corrected. I took the trust fund grandfather left me, the one you didn't know about because he set it up separately, and I invested it. I worked 100 hours a week. I learned the hospitality industry from the ground up. I started with a struggling boutique hotel in Brooklyn and turned it into the foundation of an empire. We could have helped, Marcus said weakly. Could you? I looked at him. You told me I was wasting my life. You said I'd fail. You said I was an embarrassment to the Hayes name. All of you did. The room was still silent. 300 guests watching the Hayes family implode. I sat in the back row tonight, I continued, because you told me I wasn't really family anymore. And you know what? You were right. I'm not your kind of family. I don't tie my worth to other people's approval. I don't measure success by how many people I can look down on. I don't treat people like they're disposable just because they choose a different path. Margot was crying now, her perfect makeup running. Vic, please. I didn't mean. Yes, you did, I said gently. You all did, and that's okay. I've learned to be okay with it. I looked at Thomas. Please make sure tomorrow's wedding goes perfectly. Whatever they need, approve it. Send the final bill to my office. Victoria, wait. Dad stood, portfolio still in his hands. The firm. We need to talk about the firm. We're struggling. We need your investment expertise. You need me now, I said. 3 years ago, you didn't need me. You didn't want me. You certainly didn't respect me. I walked toward the exit, but Richard Wellington Sr. stepped into my path. Miss Hayes, a moment. He glanced back at his family. I need to apologize on behalf of the Wellingtons. We were given inaccurate information about you. Had we known, you would have been invited to sit at the head table. I smiled. Mr. Wellington, respectfully, it doesn't matter. Tomorrow, your son marries my sister. I hope they're very happy. I'll be here to make sure the wedding is perfect, because that's what I do. I create perfect moments for people, even when they don't deserve them. Something flickered in his eyes. Respect. Maybe the Hudson Yards project, he paused. My office. Monday at 10 o'clock. I'll have my assistant set it up. I left Rosewood Estates and walked to where my car was parked. Not the beat-up Honda my family thought I drove, but the midnight blue Bentley Continental GT that I actually owned. My phone rang as I slid into the driver's seat. David, my assistant said when I answered, tell me you didn't burn every bridge. I didn't burn them, I replied, starting the engine. I just stopped pretending they were worth crossing. Jennifer says Singapore is official. Congratulations. That's property number 47. 47, I repeated. Grandfather would be proud. He would be, David agreed. What about tomorrow? The wedding. It'll be perfect, I said, because I'm a professional. And your family. I thought about that. About Mom's desperate voice. About Dad's shock. About Marcus' pale face. About Margot's tears. They're not my family anymore, I said. They made that very clear. But even as I said it, I knew it wasn't quite true. They were my family. They would always be my family. That was the painful part. I drove back to my apartment in Queens, the one they thought was all I could afford. They didn't know about the penthouse in Tribeca, or the beach house in the Hamptons, or the Pied à Terre in Paris. They didn't know because I'd never told them. I'd learned early that people only see what you show them. The wedding the next day was flawless. I arrived early, before any of the guests, and walked through every detail with Thomas. The flowers were perfect. The lighting was perfect. The ice sculptures, including the second one the Wellingtons had requested, were perfect. I watched from my office on the second floor as guests arrived. I saw my family's faces as they walked through the doors. Saw the way they looked at everything differently now that they knew who owned it. During the ceremony, I stood in the back of the ballroom again, but this time it was my choice. I watched Margot walk down the aisle. She looked beautiful. She looked happy. And when she glanced back and caught my eye, I smiled. A real smile. Because despite everything, she was my sister. And this was her day. After the ceremony, as guests moved to the cocktail hour, Richard Wellington Sr. found me again. Monday, he said. My office. But I should warn you, I'm bringing my entire development team. If we're going to work together, I want it done right. I wouldn't have it any other way. He nodded, then hesitated. Your family, they're overwhelmed. Your father asked me to speak to you. They want to talk. And what do you think I should do? He considered this. I think you should do what successful people do. You should decide what they're worth to you and act accordingly. That's very pragmatic. I'm a pragmatic man, Miss Hayes. It's how I built what I have. He left, and moments later, my father appeared. He looked older somehow. Smaller. Victoria, please. 5 minutes. I led him to my office. Mom was already there, and Marcus, and even Margot still in her wedding dress. We didn't know Mom started. Yes, you did, I interrupted. You knew I was doing something. You chose not to ask because you'd already decided I was failing. That's not. Dad stopped, then started again. We assumed. We were wrong. You were cruel, I corrected. There's a difference between being wrong and being cruel. Margot stepped forward, mascara streaking her face again. I'm sorry, Vic. I'm so sorry. I was horrible to you. I said terrible things. You did, I agreed. You all did. Can you forgive us? Mom asked. Can we start over? I looked at them, really looked at them. My family, flawed, shallow, status-obsessed, but also human. I don't know, I said honestly. Right now, I don't know if I can trust you. But I'm willing to try on one condition. Anything, Dad said quickly. Stop measuring people's worth by their bank accounts. Stop treating success like it's the only thing that matters. Stop making people feel small because it makes you feel big. They were quiet. I'll think about it, Dad finally said. I'll really think about it. That's all I ask. I stood. Now go. This is Margot's wedding. Go celebrate. They left one by one. Margot paused at the door. Thank you, she whispered. For making it perfect. You're welcome. Alone in my office, I looked out over the gardens where guests were laughing and dancing and celebrating. Below, my family mingled with the Wellingtons, probably trying to salvage their reputation. My phone buzzed. A text from Jennifer. Paris property is officially ours. Welcome to the European market, boss. I smiled and typed back, excellent. Set up meetings for next week. Time to expand. Because that's what I did. I expanded. I grew. I built. And I did it all without needing anyone to tell me I was worthy of being called family.